So if this seems a little disjointed, it's because I filmed an intro for this segment up on my roof, and the whole thing was out of focus. So I'm shooting this after the fact, but as an intro to this week's sort of bonus episode. And again, thanks again for watching. And if you like my content, please subscribe to my channel. You can hit the button below and you can turn on notifications and you'll get notices every time I post something new. So this week, we're just gonna really focus on one ingredient, tomatoes. And if you remember last episode, when I was talking about the zucchini blossom fritters and the zucchini blossoms, I talked about getting them at my farmer's market and that you can only really get them typically at a farmer's market because they're so perishable and seasonal. They're not gonna last in a supermarket, so you typically don't see them. They don't go through those long distribution chains. I'm lucky. I've got a farmer's market that's about 5 blocks down the street. I can walk there. They have it every Saturday morning. And I love to go down there and just walk through and take a look at all the different produce stands. It's just all beautiful. And there's some really great reasons to go to your farmer's market if you've got one available to you. If you can walk to one like I can, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, or if you can drive to one if it's not that far away, I highly recommend it. First of all, you're supporting your local growers, and there's nothing like supporting your community. That's always a plus. Usually the people that are growing these are within just a few hours of the market, and that also leads to the fact that you're going to get really good quality fresh produce. Because let's face it, it's just simple logistics. The farther and longer it takes to ship something, the less fresh it's going to be. So yeah, we can go to the supermarket and get stuff that was grown in Chile or Central America, South America, Asia, Mexico, and those things are going to be fine, but they're not going to be as fresh as just getting there from your farmer's market. Which leads to the third reason. One of the reasons that the produce is so fresh you get at a farmer's market is they're only growing what's in season. And it's a very seasonable product. So when you go to the farmer's market, you're going to find different things from week to week or season to season. And there's something really gratifying from a chef's standpoint about getting in tune with the seasonality of food and cooking based on those seasonal ingredients that are at their prime when you buy them. And again, like I said, we're spoiled. We can buy just about everything we want in the grocery store. Again, it's grown all over the world, shipped to us, and it's not bad. I mean, the quality is not that bad at all, but it's not anywhere near that freshness of getting it within a few days of when it was grown. And again, it also builds up this anticipation for the idea that you're going to have to cook with what's available, and you're going to have to wait. For instance, I'm going to be doing the squash blossoms for another couple of weeks, and they're going to be gone until next summer. And maybe another month or so, but they're going to be gone. And then I'm not going to be able to cook them until next year. And I'm going to look forward to that. I'll miss them, but you know what? It's a treat. When they're here, I get to cook them. So, and the same thing with going to your market, seeing what's available. In the winter, you're going to have a whole different set of produce. You might find Brussels sprouts and root vegetables like carrots and parsnips. And on the fruit side, apples and pears. Whereas in the summer, we've got wonderful peaches and plums, and we've got the squash blossoms I was talking about. We've got squash, summer squash, zucchini, yellow squash, all kinds of different cucumbers that are coming up, little mini Persian cucumbers, and just all of those summer ingredients. And one ingredient that we're going to cook with today is the tomato. And of all of the ingredients you can get at a market, the tomato is probably the one where you're going to notice the biggest difference of getting it at a farmer's market where it's been locally grown versus buying it at a store. And if you've ever gotten tomatoes from a farmer's market, or if you have gardens or friends with gardens and eaten a fresh vine-ripened tomato, you know what I'm talking about. There's nothing like it. The flavor, it's just bursting with tomato flavor. my grandmother used to grow tomatoes. And I can remember when I was a little kid, in the summer, we'd take one of those tomatoes and cut it in half and just put some salt on it, and we'd eat it just like that. And it was, nothing better. It was just delicious. And the flip side of that is, like, when I get a lunch, from a deli, a sandwich, half the time I'll either say no tomatoes, or I'll take this tomato slices out and just toss them, because they're these pale green, mushy, pieces of something that have no flavor at all. If you taste one of those, there's no flavor to it. So tomatoes are one of those ingredients that really shine when they're fresh, ripened properly, and brought in locally. And we're going to do two things with those today. We're going to do a gazpacho, and there's lots of different types of gazpachos. I'll go into that. And then we're going to do an Italian bruschetta. And both of these really don't involve any cooking. They're just, you take a few ingredients, and again, this is all about letting those tomatoes shine and be the star. And so, they're very simple to make. It's kind of a little bit of a throwaway bonus episode, but I hope you enjoy. And I think after this, hopefully you'll have a new appreciation for tomatoes that are locally grown and fresh, and also that you'll have an appreciation for your farmer's market. And if you've got one available, you'll make sure you visit it, and make it a habit of going down there and buying your produce for the week or even for a few days and trying out new things based on what they've got in stock. And if you see something at a farmer's market and you want to see what you can do with it, leave me a comment below, and I'll try to come up with some recipes for whatever it is. If it's kale, whatever, just leave me some comments, and I'll come up with some recipes for you. So we're going to make some gazpacho now. So this is really not even a recipe per se. I'll post the quantities, or you can just listen as I walk through them, and there's really no cooking involved. You just need your ingredients in a blender for this gazpacho. Now this comes from there's a lot of different types of gazpachos. You'll see a lot where they put bread in them to thicken them. This is not one of those. This comes from the Andalusia region of Spain, which is in the south, and specifically the capital is of city of Seville or Sevilla. And it gets hot there. It gets like 100 degrees during the summer, and sometimes it's just too hot to really think about eating. So, for a midday sort of some nutrition and a nice refreshing break, a lot of the bars and people in their homes will have a pitcher of this gazpacho. And it's just a real light, refreshing, it's a creamy gazpacho, although there's no cream, it's just that's the mouthfeel. And that comes from some olive oil we're gonna mix into it. And this is a sipping, not a spooning gazpacho. You're not gonna eat this in a bowl. You're gonna put it in a glass, maybe with an ice cube if it's hot out, and you're just gonna sip it, and it's just really refreshing. By the way, try sipping, not spooning, saying that 5 times in a row. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start with about 2 pounds of really fresh, ripe tomatoes. And as you can see, I've already got those, most of them chopped up in my blender already. But all you wanna do is you wanna core the tomatoes and cut them into quarters. We're not gonna seed them for this recipe necessarily, but all you're gonna do is you're gonna take a sharp paring knife and come in at an angle like that. And you can see I'm kind of at an angle there. And we're just gonna cut all the way around that top core, which is kind of hard and really inedible. We're gonna just take that out. And then we're just gonna cut this in half that way and half that way. So we got 4 quarters. And we're just gonna put those in our blender. And we got one more. Now, if you did wanna seed your tomatoes, and we're gonna seed them later for the bruschetta that I'm gonna make, what you would do is after you cut them in half, and let me see if I have a little bowl here, yeah. So after you cut them in half, you're just gonna squeeze the tomato and squeeze those seeds out of there. And then you got the tomato that you can dice for your bruschetta or whatever else. So in this recipe, there's really no reason to do that, but I just wanted to show you for when we do the bruschetta, because I'm probably just gonna chop all the tomatoes in advance for that. So we're gonna put this one in here as well. And then we're gonna put the top on, and we're just gonna whiz this a little bit. Okay, the reason I kind of whizzed it when I put the tomatoes in before I did anything else is mainly for space. If you noticed with the big chunks of tomatoes, they were up to here and it's hard to put anything else in. Once I kind of whizzed it up and liquefied it, it's down here now, so I got plenty of room to add my other ingredients. All right, so we're gonna take the lid off. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add a pepper. And we're not gonna add a bell pepper in this recipe. The flavor is just too strong and it's too tough. We're gonna use a long, thin, mild pepper. If you're on the East Coast, you might find Cubanelles or Italian frying peppers. Here on the West Coast, and this is an Anaheim chili, this is perfect. You want them mild. If they have a little bit of heat, that's okay, but you don't really want too spicy here, but a little bit of heat is not too bad. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just cut the top off and try not to go in all the way, because then what we can do, cut around like this. And when we pull this out, we're gonna get the core with most of our seeds right out of there. We don't want those. Then we're just gonna cut this in half. Again, you don't have to worry about getting every single seed out of here. We're gonna throw that in our blender. Put some cucumber next as the next ingredient. I like to use these Persian cucumbers. They're really flavorful. They don't have a lot of seeds, and their skin is really thin. So you don't need to, don't be mean to these tomatoes or these cucumbers, because they're thin skinned and they don't take it very well. But what you wanna do is you wanna chop these into chunks again, just like we did. If you're using a regular cucumber, you're gonna use one regular size cucumber, and that you're gonna wanna peel. But again, because the skin is so thin on these, we don't need to peel them. So we're just gonna take those, throw them in, cut this one into chunks, throw it in there. See how easy this is? I mean, I'm just chopping things up and chunking it up and throwing it in a blender. We're gonna throw in a clove of garlic, cut it in half if you want, you don't have to. The blender's gonna work its magic. And then the last ingredient, the last sort of vegetable we're gonna throw in there is a small onion. You can use a white onion. I happen to have one. I'd cut a couple slices off for something else. If you've got you can use a yellow onion, red onion. If you've got a larger onion, you might wanna just use half of it. Make this a couple times and you'll get a feel for the flavor that you like. And you can adjust, if it's tastes too oniony, too strong, cut it down. That's up to you. So anyway, I'm gonna use all of this. This is a relatively small white onion. We're gonna put that in there. Our blender top is going back on. And we're gonna whiz this up again. You want a good blender here, like a Vitamix or something strong with a strong motor, because you really want to liquefy. Okay, so we've got, what I was saying was the blender was running, was you want a really strong blender here, like a Vitamix with a good motor, because you really want this to liquefy up. So now we're gonna add a couple more ingredients to finish this. We're gonna add a couple pinches of salt. And you can adjust the salt later, so don't go overboard. I'm gonna do just one more, okay? And then we're gonna add a couple teaspoons of sherry vinegar, and I'm just gonna eyeball this. This is a good Spanish sherry vinegar I get from an online company. It's called Donostia Foods. If you like canned seafood like sardines and anchovies and things like that, this online store has great products for that. But they also make this really nice sherry vinegar right from Spain. So we're just gonna put a couple teaspoons in there. Like I said, I just eyeballed it. You can measure it out if you want. And we're gonna start whizzing this again, and then since the blender's loud, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do before I start it. But once this is starting to whiz up again, I've got about 3 ounces here of good olive oil. And you wanna use your good quality olive oil here. If you've got a Spanish olive oil, all the better. Extra virgin, without a doubt, just not a regular olive oil. And what I'm going to do when this starts to run is I'm going to start streaming this in to emulsify it into the gazpacho, and that's what's going to give it a great flavor, but also this great luxurious smooth mouthfeel and texture. And so an emulsification is simply, if you've ever poured water and oil together, you know that they separate. The oil separates from the water, one's heavier than the other, and you know they separate out. But when you emulsify something, like if you whisk a vinaigrette together, or if we're going to do it in a blender like this in a slow stream, what happens is, I won't go too much into the science, but the water and oil molecules kind of blend together, and they kind of form a suspension where they don't come apart. And so that's called an emulsification, when you emulsify and you make it one sort of homogeneous. Now it might separate over time, but if you stream it in really slowly, it's going to emulsify nicely, and you're going to have this nice smooth gazpacho. Same thing with you're making like a vinaigrette, and that's why they always tell you to whisk in the olive oil slowly. A mayonnaise or an aioli is the same thing. It's an emulsification, and you're just, if you've ever made an aioli with egg yolks, you know, you're just putting a drop or two of olive oil in at a time and getting that emulsified in so that it doesn't separate. So anyway, that's a little bit of science behind emulsification. You can call me Alton Brown if you want. But anyway, so we're going to stream that in as this goes on. So let's start the blender. And now we're going to start to stream in our olive oil. I can't run this after 10 o'clock at night because it's too loud for the neighbors, but it's a good blender. So that's it. That's the gazpacho. There's one more step, and it's kind of optional, but I highly recommend it. And we'll show the finished product in a little bit, but you've got this great smooth gazpacho, and even as strong as the blender is, there's still going to be bits and grain of the vegetables in there. So the final step is you're going to take a fine mesh strainer, and you're just going to strain this into a container, pressing the solids through with a spatula. And it takes a little bit of time to get it all through there, and you can do without it. It's just going to be a little more rustic. It's going to be a little more sort of grainy tasting. This is a great additional step, and it really makes a difference. So I highly recommend it. And then you're just going to put this into a pitcher, and we're going to put it in the refrigerator and chill it for at least 6 hours or overnight. And then you're just going to pour it into a glass and sip it. Maybe drizzle a couple drops of good olive oil right on the top before you do. I'm going to cut and come back when it's chilled, and we'll sort of sample the final product together. But that's it for the gazpacho. And then the second part of this is going to be some nice bruschetta that we're also going to do with the tomatoes. But I really try this recipe if you can find some good tomatoes. It's really refreshing. It's a great start to a dinner. Little between you and me, yes, you can add some vodka to it and maybe even some hot sauce and make yourself a really kicked up Bloody Mary. But one way or another, give it a try. And all right, we'll see you in a little bit. So we've got some of that gazpacho. As you can see, it's this beautiful pink color. And I put a couple ice cubes in there. I'll have a little taste. That's just delicious. I mean, it's just that tomato flavor comes through. You've got the little bit of the spice from the onion and the garlic. And the cucumber kind of gives it that sort of mellow flavor. It's just a delicious, refreshing start. So I definitely try this recipe. It's really good. I love it. It's great, you know, first thing in the morning with your breakfast. If you have this, you'll never say I could have had a V8 again. You'll want this stuff. Got a little white wine too. It's that time of day. So we're going to do a simple bruschetta. And, you know, there's a lot of different bruschettas. It's a regional Italian dish with grilled bread, and you can go from there. There's a simple one that's just simply grilled bread drizzled with olive oil and rubbed with garlic. It's called fettuta. There's the classic bruschetta, which we're going to make with tomatoes and basil and some garlic. And there's also you can put all kinds of stuff on it. You can do bruschetta with sautéed onions, with spinach, with you know, whatever, sun-dried tomatoes. I've made some, and sage, and you can put cheese like mozzarella in there to make almost like a little caprese bruschetta. The possibilities are endless, but just you know, we're going to do the simple one. And all we've got here is we've got some really good bread, and I happen to have made a Kalamata olive rosemary loaf this morning, so I got a couple slices of that. We've got some tomatoes that I had seeded, and if you recall from the gazpacho section how I seeded that, and I've chopped these up here. And I've got some basil and some salt, and also I've got a clove of garlic that I've cut in half, and I lost half of it, but half of it will be plenty. Okay, so that's probably somewhere. It'll pop up. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got the grill behind me going there, and it's pretty hot, so I'm just going to put these on the grill to start toasting them. Okay. So I'm just going to take about a tablespoon of olive oil and add it to my tomatoes. That's about it. I'm just going to stir those up. Notice I'm not adding any salt at this point, because if you add salt too soon, the salt's going to draw moisture out of the tomatoes and they're going to get mushy. And we don't want that to happen. They'll get watery and mushy. We don't want that. So we're just simply going to leave the salt, and we'll finish with the salt. But for now, we've just got a little bit of the olive oil and the tomatoes marinating while we grill our bread. So let's go check on that. Can't get enough of that. So the bread's starting to get nice and toasty. And again, this is just celebrating the classic tomato. And that's it. And it's about as simple as you can get. We've got some of our chiffonade of basil here. Remember we did that last week with our squash blossoms, cutting it into little strips. So let's see what we got going. Okay, so our bread's getting nice and toasty. I think it's just about ready. So we're going to go pull those off. You can see the nice grill marks on there, and it's just nice and toasted. So let's just pull that off the grill. And you can see those nice grill marks there, nice and toasted. So we're just going to pull that off. And yep, that's hot. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to rub this with that cut clove of garlic, the half that didn't escape. And that's going to put a nice garlic flavor on there. And the reason I don't like to chop the garlic into the tomatoes is you get too much of a raw garlic flavor. It overwhelms the dish. This gives it a nice garlic. You definitely get the garlic. It's there, but it's not going to be as overwhelming as biting into chunks of raw garlic. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just take some of those tomatoes and spoon that right on top of the bread. Look how beautiful that is. A little bit more. Get some of the olive oil and juice that's in the bottom there. Look at those tomatoes. And now we're gonna sprinkle it with some flaky sea salt. I think this is a Maldon sea salt, but any good flaky sea salt will do. We're going to drizzle it with just a little bit more of that olive oil. Again, you want to use a good olive oil here. And we're going to sprinkle it with a little bit of that basil. And you've got this beautiful tomato bruschetta that's just, again, bursting with that tomato flavor. It's a great little starter for a dinner party. Have a little bite of that. The fresh flavor of that tomato just comes right through. You got the nice crusty bread with a little bit of that good olive oil, just the right amount of salt. And again, you get that hint of garlic from rubbing the bread with that, and you also get that nice basil flavor on top. You know, it's just, again, it's just a nice fresh dish. It's going to take advantage of those red tomatoes that you're going to find at your farmer's market. It's simple. It features the ingredient. There's no cooking here. This is all about the quality of those tomatoes. If you can't find good ripe ones, skip this dish. But if you can find them, make this, serve it at a dinner party. Your friends will love you for it. So until the next time, ciao. Thanks again. Please subscribe. Click the subscribe button below. Just click on the notification bell so that you get notifications when I have new videos. And I look forward to seeing you guys the next time. Who knows what we'll do. I'm getting lots of requests. And if you have requests, comment and leave me what you want me to try to make. But in the meantime, bon appetit and enjoy. Go to your farmer's market.